Welcome in, everyone. You're listening to Bulls Central. And from all of your requests to continue having more guests on the channel, I'm fortunate enough to have our very own beat writer covering the Chicago Bulls for The Athletic. He spent a number of years covering Oklahoma City Thunder, and more recently, he's also the founder and author of Money Talks, which is a new endeavor he's just recently started. It's my pleasure to welcome back to the show Darnell Mayberry of The Athletic. Darnell, appreciate you making the time as always, and good to have you back on.
I appreciate you having me. It's always a pleasure.
And Darnell is traveling right now. He's on his way back from Indianapolis to Chicago, so that's why his video's off. But I'm sure most of you are already, but if you're not, be sure to follow Darnell at Darnell Mayberry on Twitter. Check out all of his great work at theathletic.com. I'll leave a link to that in the description. Darnell, it's been an interesting year for the Bulls, to say the least. I don't know if interesting is maybe the best word to use. I think we can all agree not really what we expected in terms of the Bulls drastically underperforming to what we thought this team could be. I wanted to focus on a few topics for today, really surrounding the Bulls' inactivity at the trade deadline, talking about the potential buyout candidates that they could pursue. But where I wanted to start actually is in regards to the Bulls' most recent performances we've seen post-deadline. The Bulls have shot the three ball terribly with the exception of last night. They're turning the ball over at a high rate, and a lot of times they just look very lost out there as a unit. But what has concerned me the most in watching these games is, aside from, a few guys, the team looks checked out. The effort isn't there. The energy isn't there. The body language on the court says it all to me, for lack of a better word. The guys have just kind of stopped caring. You're interviewing these guys in the locker room. You're around the team much more than us Bulls fans would be. Have you noticed a similar change in the demeanor post-trade deadline?
I walked in the locker room last night after the Pacers lost, and Vucevic is on his way to his locker, and he's about to get dressed. And I say, yeah, frustrating night, huh? He says, night? He's like, this has been a frustrating year. I mean, the look on his face, the look of exasperation on this man's face said it all. And it's just not one night. It's not 1 week. It's not 1 month. It's been like this all season. And you just wonder when they're going to fix this, how they're going to fix it. Maybe if they're able to fix this. But I do know from inside that locker room, the players are beyond frustrated, and it feels like there is a countdown going on. That's why I was so surprised to see them do nothing at the deadline, because it just felt like that going in, that everyone knew something needed to happen and it didn't happen. And these performances are the only thing that keeps happening.
Well, and that's the thing, right? I mean, the inactivity at the deadline, which we'll talk about. I mean, from a fan perspective, there was always this sort of, not hope, I guess, but when things weren't going well, there was this understanding, well, we have the trade deadline. They're going to make changes, hopefully, anyway, right? And then changes weren't made. So now when I watch a Bulls game and I see them play the way that they have been, I'm kind of checking out myself as a fan, right? Because it's like, well, this is the team for the rest of the year. And so I'm just wondering if the players are kind of having a similar sentiment where they're just kind of counting down until the offseason. Is that kind of your feeling or sense of what you're getting in the locker room?
Yeah, I mean, when you started by talking about the three-point shooting and the turnovers, I was like, oh, boy, I hope we don't get into it like a deep discussion in basketball, like X's and O's.
Yeah.
I think we're all kind of checked out, or beyond that at least. And part of it is, I'm not bringing up Lonzo Ball as an excuse, but that he made so much of a difference. And then you've got all these other guys bouncing in and out of the lineup, whether it's DeMar DeRozan or Derrick Jones Jr., Javonte Green, Alex Caruso, all of these different guys, players going in and out. You can't really get a true sense of what this team is. And unfortunately for the Bulls, they've been using that same excuse for years now.
Yeah. One of the things I see a lot of Bulls fans talking about on Twitter, just generally speaking across all social media, is that, it's becoming more and more apparent based on what we're seeing on the court as well as in post-game interviews, that this team has quit on Billy Donovan, that he's lost the locker room. A lot of people have been critical of Billy Donovan's coaching this season, which, whether that's fair or not, we could talk about, because I think there's blame for the Bulls' underperformance all around. But what's your take on that? Do you think the guys are no longer responding to Billy Donovan as much as they used to?
I was kind of watching the body language and the reaction in the huddles last night as much as anything on the court. And I did still see a lot of engagement when Billy Donovan was in the middle of the huddle on the bench. Whether it was orchestrating a play or just trying to communicate whatever he wanted, some instructions. So, and then at one point, I think everyone is probably looking at Zach Lavine when that topic comes up. But I saw Billy come up to Zach, patted him on the side, and then Zach went up over to Billy to try to get further instructions. So little moments like that are what resonates with me in terms of whether I'm analyzing if a team is checked out on a coach. So I don't see that. I just don't know if they think what they're doing is working, and I think it's bigger than being checked out on Billy. I think they just don't think that this is effective, and they know that they're bumping their heads up against a brick wall.
Speaking of Billy Donovan, I wanted to ask you this because I think a lot of people, including you guys in the media, were a little surprised by this. It was revealed, I don't know, I think it was a few weeks into the season that the Bulls had given Billy Donovan an extension over the offseason, which for me personally, I'd never seen something like that where a coach got this sort of secret extension that was revealed after the fact. Have you seen anything like that before in your time covering basketball?
No, it was surprising. It's normally something that you want to celebrate and publicly disclose.
Right.
You just saw it today, as a matter of fact, with the Boston Celtics. And so,
right, exactly.
I haven't seen anything like that. That was a surprise to me.
Do you think, was there a reason why they went about doing that? Do you have any idea?
I just think it was their choice. This franchise is known for doing things a little differently, and I think that was just their decision to go in that direction. I don't understand it, but it's not my franchise.
Now, I don't mean to put you on the spot. You've been covering Billy for a long time now, leading all the way back to his tenure with Oklahoma City. But do you think Billy Donovan is the right coach for this team? Meaning the right guy to elevate this team and wanting to win now based on all the moves that the front office had made?
I don't think it's I don't want to say fair question. The question's fine. I just don't think I don't know how to say this. I think we're we're asking the wrong question.
Okay.
I think it's bigger than Billy Donovan. He can only do so much with this roster. It's a roster problem, and we all know the holes and the flaws that we see every night. So, who's the best coach in the league? Take your pick. What's he going to do with this roster? They're not going to blow 16-point leads 5 times. I probably could say that, but I don't think Billy Donovan is the guy that you can easily just say, he's not the guy. They got to get someone else in, and it'll be better.
Yeah, no, and I get where you're going with it, and not trying to lead you down a path to say, hey, Billy Donovan's not the right guy for this team. Let's talk about the trade deadline, because I think that's kind of where the root cause is that everyone's been talking about recently. And obviously it starts with the front office. So the Bulls, they stood pat, despite AK saying in his press conference that they were making calls, they were taking calls, but there wasn't a deal that they felt was worth moving on. I had Casey Johnson on a few days ago, and I asked him this, but I want to get your take on it as well. Despite the fact that as we got closer to the deadline, there have been reports the Bulls front office was probably going to be fairly quiet at the deadline. But even that aside, were you surprised at all that not a single move was made, knowing how much this roster has struggled in what they needed to do?
Absolutely. And the simple, most basic way I can put it is you only get so many opportunities to improve your roster in the calendar year.
Right.
And generally it's 3 of them, right? The draft, the trade deadline, free agency. Yeah. And Arturas Karnisovas has publicly said numerous occasions that those 3 moments are, sort of what he gets up for. He gets a different level of energy and excitement around those 3 dates. And to see him sit out, not just this one, but the last 2, it's, it's just, it doesn't make sense. And I don't agree with it. I think they made a horrible decision.
Yeah. I think after the deadline and, the Bulls having not made any moves, the attention now for Bulls fans, as well as the media, actually, because what else can you do, is, okay, well, what are the Bulls going to do this offseason then? Because clearly this team does not work. That's becoming more evident in games following the deadline. There was talk about some of the potential trades that were discussed leading up to the deadline, but ultimately didn't lead to a deal. that those discussions will likely start up again in the offseason. What are you hearing on your end as some potential and intriguing deals that could happen this offseason, or that maybe were discussed at the deadline, but just, didn't go through?
Yeah, I mean, the Lavine rumors, I think we'll probably hear more of this summer. And, speaking of, he looked miserable last night after that loss.
Yeah.
A lot of that can be performer. What's the word? Performer. But they want to put on a show at times, when the media is in there. But I will say that he did look pretty sick after that loss, and he had a pretty good game too after.
Almost a triple double.
Yeah, and until crunch time is my only issues with Lavine. It's right. Like he keeps turning the ball over, or throwing up a bad shot or something like that you can just question. But for those reasons, I think you're going to hear his name back in the rumors this summer. I don't think the Bulls are married to him for all 5 years. I don't think, by the way he's kind of carried himself at times this season, he is all that happy with what's played out so far in the first year of his contract with Chicago. So that Vucevic, obviously there's going to be a lot of interest on because he's going to be a free agent. And then I'd be surprised, but I'd also keep an eye on DeMar DeRozan and the future of DeRozan with the Bulls.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to ask that as well. I mean, a lot of people are saying you got to move either one or the other. You got to move DeMar or Zach in a trade because they don't fit well together, and you likely can get the most value for them in return for a trade. What are your thoughts? Do you think that that's a necessity for the Bulls going into the offseason, basically choosing between DeMar and Zach?
I think at some point it would balance the roster a lot more if they did. I don't want to say that they are afraid to make that call because they've made some big calls already by bringing in DeRozan and Vucevic and Lonzo Ball and giving Zach the maximum contract. So this front office obviously has the courage to make big deals, but if you trade one of those guys, I mean, at this point you kind of got to get it right, and their last couple of trades have gone horribly wrong. So
right.
I could understand if they've got cold feet at this point.
Yeah, part of me also thinks, we don't know, this is a new front office still, relatively speaking, right? We don't know them that well, but what strikes me about this front office is that they're probably a little prideful in the sense that they might be a little too, it's hard for them to admit defeat, or that, hey, maybe we made a mistake in putting this roster together. We did it maybe a little too quickly. We were a little too aggressive on it. Do you kind of get the sense as well that, that's part of the reason why they're standing pat, and they're just like, well, I think we can make this work. And Lonzo Ball is going to be coming back. We can make this work. Do you get that sense?
It's hard to read those guys. I'll just start by saying that.
Yeah.
It's really, really hard to read them. I don't know if they believe in this roster or are keeping their cards close to the vest and absolutely are disgusted and can't wait to get rid of everyone, but just can't say that. Right. So it's going to be an interesting summer. Obviously, I think you're going to hear a lot from the Bulls this summer. It's not going to be like last summer. It's not going to be like the last two trade deadlines, because one thing that I do, and in my conversations with Arturas understand from what he's told me, is that he does not like losing. And so when we're seeing these results happen again and again, it's not like he's sitting there and he's cool with it. It's eating at him, but I think they're trying to figure out what's best for the franchise long-term as opposed to being reactionary.
What would you want to see happen in the offseason for the Bulls? Like, obviously being realistic about it, but what would be an ideal offseason look like to you? I mean, obviously, we're not GMs. We can be, armchair GMs and things like that. But what would that look like to you?
Well, I mean, I would like to see Lonzo Ball make some progress on the court. He's still not even doing basketball activities. So start there, because that's your big free agent acquisition right there is Lonzo Ball. Your point guard position is solidified. This team looks completely different, and we can't rule that out. I mean, conversations people are having, and not in the league, I'm saying from the fan base, whether Lonzo will ever play again, I think it's way too premature for that.
Yeah.
So I just start there. If he can get back on the floor and he can play at the start of next season, I mean, that's a massive upgrade to your roster.
Sure.
What I'd like to see the front office do is go find some shooters.
Yeah.
Simple as that. I mean, you can't shoot 26% over the course of 5 games and expect to be competitive in 2023.
Yeah.
And play a different style that allows for more. I mean, whether that's trading DeMar DeRozan, and you have to make a hard decision to do that, that's not going to impede you from developing your roster and advancing as a franchise. As great as he is, as entertaining as he is, he doesn't play the modern game. So I'd like to see more shooting in here. I'd like to see this team get younger. I hate to say this, more athletic, but like a Jackson Hayes type, inside, I think would do wonders. Along with a point guard, a healthy Lonzo Ball. So it doesn't take much, but it needs to happen, and they can't keep letting opportunities pass them by.
Yeah, I like the Garpax reference there. That was good. Let's shift gears a little bit and talk about the buyout market for a bit. A lot of names that could be, intriguing pieces for the Bulls. For like names that we've been hearing most often: Patrick Beverley, Russell Westbrook. Some people have been talking about Kevin Love after it was announced that he just reached a buyout agreement with the Cleveland Cavaliers. For me personally, I cringe at the idea of bringing in a guy like Westbrook, just because I feel it would be obviously a horrible fit, considering the Bulls need shooting. They need better defenders, and they need guys who aren't going to turn the ball over at a high rate. But there is also the sentiment among Bulls Nation of, well, why not? At this rate, the Bulls are desperate. They need guys that bring energy. They need a true point guard. And hey, it would just be only for, the rest of this season anyway, since Lonzo Ball isn't going to be coming back most likely. So why not? You actually put out a piece on why you think Westbrook and on the Bulls isn't the worst idea, which I'll leave linked in the description for those who might have missed it, citing that, hey, the Bulls are in need of a direction. Talk to me more about that.
You basically said it. Why not? That's Russell Westbrook's motto, and that's the premise of my argument. At this point, what are the Bulls doing? And the only thing that I would counter is that I would not say that it would be a 1-year rental. I'd say that they could do this for the rest of this season and next season as Lonzo Ball heals up. You don't have to rush Lonzo Ball back. Russell Westbrook can have starting point guard job for as long as it takes Lonzo Ball to heal. So, there's familiarity there with Billy Donovan, of course, who coached him in 4 seasons in Oklahoma City, but also Mo Cheeks. I don't forget how many years exactly Mo had him, but they had a great relationship in Oklahoma City, and I would venture to say a lot better than the one that he shared with Billy Donovan, to be frank about it. So there's a lot of familiarity here. The thing is I think Russell Westbrook probably wants to stay in LA and play for the Clippers, and we're seeing reports already that they are engaged in that. But if it doesn't happen for whatever reason, I think the Bulls would love to have him just from that standpoint of getting some energy into this team. I mean, I know internally the Bulls are really like dumbfounded by how this team is coming out every night, flat in stretches, if not entire 48-minute games.
Talk to me about the fit, though, right? Because we were talking about how Bulls desperately need shooters. Westbrook obviously is not a shooter by any means, but he does provide a lot of some of the needs, right? They need a playmaker of some kind, someone that actually will come out ready to play hard. Is there a world in which where if they were to bring in Westbrook that they could get worse, which I guess at that point it's like, whatever, like, can they get much worse than they are right now? But they could get worse, which means I guess maybe a higher likelihood that they might be able to keep their top 4 protected pick. But do you think that there would be a world where if they were to bring in Westbrook, it could actually make the situation they find themselves in worse than where they are right now?
Yeah, I think the only thing that would make this situation worse with the addition of Westbrook or any strong, dominant personality adding to DeRozan and Lavine and Vucevic, Caruso, Dragic, would just be the personality, the ego component,
Right.
and that's something that you just don't know until they get in the room with each other and start winning or losing games together.
Right.
But maybe that's needed too. Westbrook's going to come in and say some stuff that probably hasn't been said in a season and a half inside that Bulls locker room. But in terms of the shooting component and the fit, I think there's an element that you hinted at that a lot of people aren't really talking about. They look at at Westbrook's shooting percentages, maybe think he's just going to drag it down even more. But you look at the pressure that he puts on the rim and being an explosive downhill attacker, which is what the Bulls always talk about needing. That opens up lanes for passing out to shooters and spacing the floor. So I think he'll be able to do that if they are able to sign him, if they want to sign him. And that's something that the Bulls really, really need. But obviously they need guys to be able to make those shots. But right now they don't even have a guy who can consistently create those shots. So Westbrook can do that and be a huge upgrade in that department.
Let me ask you this, because I follow kind of closely, just because I'm a nerd like that. I follow closely as far as the Bulls, playoff odds, chances, based on basketballreference.com with their remaining schedule, which also provides their chances of landing a top 4 pick. As of right now, the odds of them actually landing in the top 4 pick is higher than it is to make the playoffs. Again, I mean, these, algorithms and what they put together for formulas to determine that is a bit subjective, but do you think it actually might be worth it for the Bulls to just, hey, let's just try to go for that top 4 pick, because this is a stacked draft class. Otherwise you're losing that pick. And it's not like you're really going to be going anywhere in the playoffs if you get there. What's your perspective?
Yeah, I don't see this franchise. It's my 6th season now. I don't see them doing it just because it doesn't seem like they have that in their DNA as an organization. Yeah. But they're almost kind of headed there on their own.
And like, not unintentionally heading there.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it, like Caruso's staying banged up. He stays banged up. Dragic had 30 good games and looks like, he's ready to retire. DeRozan's got this grade 1 thigh sprain. Who knows what his situation is going to be going forward. And it's just, Javonte Green's got the Lonzo Ball knee issue all of a sudden. And, this is a serious situation with these injuries piling up, and with only 20, 23, 24 games left, like I said, they might be headed there that way on their own.
What's the latest on Javonte, by the way? Because I feel like we never get any status updates on him. And I think it's also he's a bit underappreciated in terms of the energy that he brings to this team. Like, he's a good momentum shifter, and having him back on the roster would actually be really big for the Bulls. But we haven't heard anything about his injury. What's sort of the latest on that?
Yeah, I see him doing more than Lonzo Ball at this point, but not much more. Like, he's rehabbing, and it doesn't sound like he's close. But it does, it's a good question. It's time for an update on it, but it just doesn't sound like it's anywhere close to being healthy.
Wow. And Lonzo Ball, I mean, I think we kind of all know where the answer is going, but AK did say we'll have an update for you at the All-Star break. What I assume it means that he's going to be shut down for the season. Is that kind of what you're gathering as well?
Yeah, I think that's just going to make it official. But he's not anywhere close to the court from anything that we've seen. So right. I'd be surprised if he comes back this season at all.
Darnell, I'll get you out of here on this. AK was asked in the press conference after the deadline, I think it was Sam Smith that might have asked the question, on if he thought the Bulls can make the playoffs. And he answered with a definitive yes. You've been covering basketball for a long time. Do you think this team can make the playoffs based on what we've seen from them this season?
Can, yes. Will they? I don't think they will.
Okay.
If you look at their last 10 to 15 games or so, that's a brutal stretch for a team that is struggling to beat the Houston Rockets and the Orlando Magics of the world. So and the Indiana
Pacers twice.
Yeah, and in a 22-day span. So it's nothing gives you confidence that says this team is going to be able to turn the corner in the next 24 games and figure this out. I mean, they, again, going back to that phrase checked out, they look like they know that this isn't working, and then is it going to work, and something is needed that they don't want to say. So, no, I don't even think they're going to make the play-in.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. When I asked KC, he said he thinks, but granted, this was before the Pacers game and actually before the Magic game. And he was saying, they'll probably make the play-in as like a 9 or 10 seed, but I don't see them making out of it. So even missing the play-in, wow. I mean, I guess when you think about it, the Raptors are starting to play better basketball. They're making their way up, and who's going to start losing for them to actually make their way in? That's even if they can actually pick up some wins and string some together. But yeah. Anyway, Darnell, as always, I really do appreciate you taking the time out of your day to meet with me. Keep up the great work at The Athletic, as well as your new endeavor, Money Talks. I'll leave a link to that as well for those interested in the description. Thanks again for Darnell for joining, and best of luck to the rest of the season.
Thanks for having me.